Hello, I am Theodore. I'm working as a sewing machine repairman technician, and here I have a Husqvarna PRISMA 990. It is, well, ordinary service, but on these models I am usually checking the electronics and replaces the capacitors if needed. So I think I'm going to do that, as that is a common problem on the Prisma models. So I start with, of course, removing the stitch plate, and yeah, it's yeah, as usual, some dust are having a party underneath the stitch plate. I think it's strange that the owners of the sewing machines, well, some of them rarely remove the stitch plate at all, but if they're not told to, how should they know? As you can see, it's a lot, so it was really time for servicing this machine. Removing the plate that holds the hook in place to be able to remove more of the dust. It's almost, as you can see, the layers of which color the user have used on different projects. And in between the teeth here, it's really important to clean up and remove the dust. Back here, back the hook driver, it's also important to try to remove everything which is being collected. And here is the catch of the day. This machine is really easy to service. It's 2 screws, and then you have the whole back plate off. So it's a really nice construction. I remove here as well the hook driver to check the worm gear, and yeah, as expected, since there was so much underneath the stitch plate, was not well, it was as expected. So I try to remove all the dust and oil. It's kind of a thick paste which is being stuck in the teeth here. So I use a tweezer a sharp tweezer to just scrape out the in between the teeth there, and Q-tip is one of the tools I use a lot. Here I remove the screw for the front, and before I have removed the front I have to take out the power supply to detach the cable. Yeah, new friend here. It's dried spider. It's many fun things to discover inside the sewing machines. And here is the front plate off, and I can take a look at the capacitors on the motherboard. And of course it's a good idea to replace them with some new capacitors. Those the capacitor dries out, and the internal resistance is going so much down, so it's almost as a short, and too much current is flowing through, and that usually results in burned power supply. But of course they're not so damaged, so they're not able to repair. I have some images from cases I've had. As you can see here, it's burned. The diodes, rectifier diodes, are cracked totally, and as you see here, I have to build up again the PCB and replace the rectifier diodes. So even if it looks bad, it's not a really big problem to repair the power supply. But of course it's much easier to replace the capacitors before it goes so far. So it burns the power supply. So of course I see here taking a look at the power supply, and you have the electrolytic capacitor, the round one, and you have the other one, which is the REFA, and that is obvious that I will replace. But first I'm going through the mechanical part of the machine, oiling and cleaning. I have vacuum cleaned the machine, and I have used compressed air to blow away the dust, clean it up. So I'm going through all the places where there are mechanical parts that moves, metal to metal moving parts, and check that it's moving freely. So the oil that I'm using is pretty thin oil, so it's going into the bearing. And here you can see that I am releasing the bushing. I turn on the hand wheel and feel how freely the mechanical part goes. And while I'm turning, I unscrew or loosen the clips that are holding the bushing in place, and while tightening the screw, I turn the hand wheel so it will align, and almost every time I can easily feel that the mechanical parts and the hand wheel is moving more freely. So on all the sewing machine that I'm looking at, and it's easy to reach these places, the places where the bushing is tightened, fastened. I aligned the bushing part. And over to the hook drive, and yeah, and of course I have to check the alignment. The timing, of course, when I remove the hook drive, the timing will be wrong. Of course, I can be lucky and put it back together exactly in the same spots. The teeth are matching correctly, but nah, I have to just be sure that the timing is correct. And it's not, this is just for the, to be sure that the teeth of the worm gear are back in the correct place. I don't have to fine adjust the timing. Just be sure that the hook drive is in the correct place. Cleaning and oiling the screw there. And getting everything back in place. Of course, when I'm doing this, I also check the distance between the needle and the hook as well. Now I'm over to replacing the parts that I want to replace, and here I just mark the capacitor. The electrolytic capacitor have plus and minus, so on some PCBs it's marked, but not here, so I just mark it to be sure that the plus and minus is correct when I replace it with the new one. Using solder wick to clean up the spots. And of course, removing the safety capacitor, the REFA safety capacitor. They are really not good capacitors. It's yeah, I don't know how many I have replaced because they have started to burn. In some machines where the safety capacitors are in the foot controller and they shorten, the machine is starting to go by itself, which can be, yeah, kind of scary. Situations where the customer said that they've been standing in the kitchen and suddenly they hear that the sewing machine is starting to go by itself in the living room, and when they go out to see who it is using the machine, they know no one is sitting by the sewing machine. So yeah, some spirits living in the house are want to use it, but it's of course just the safety capacitor, and in over 90% of the cases it's the Rifa brand safety capacitor which is causing the problem. And when the safety capacitors are in the power inlet and they short, they start to burn and it smells awful, and a lot of smoke is coming from the machine, and it's really not, it's not looking good at all. So I understand that the customers are wondering if it is possible to repair the machine at all. But of course it's just the safety capacitor, and it's not the expensive part, and it's easy to replace. So every machine that I have on my workbench, and having those old Rifa safety caps, I always replace them. So the customer don't have to experience some ghosts trying their machine, or some fire or smoke escaping from the machine. Here I'm looking at the main board, and as you can see here, this capacitor have the legs. This is a capacitor, it's for used when it's standing, but I don't have those axial capacitors, so I have to just make one of those legs longer and just use some heat shrink tube and make it possible to lay the capacitor down, because of course if this is standing it's too high, so it's not possible to put the cover back on. So then we have to just modify this a little bit, and it's not any problem to use it. I always make the minus leg longer, It's not a special reason for that. It's yeah, it's just how I started to do it. On this PCB, it's marked with plus on the leg, on one of the legs, so it's what plus and minus is marked except from that one. But the other one is marked with a plus beside the hole for the leg. Some of the legs are bent on the underneath, so I just use a plier to cut off the leg as close to the PCB as possible, and use some solder wick, and it's easy to remove the capacitors then when I have done that. And in with the new ones. And checking the polarity, plus minus. And double check before I solder them. And the modified one. And I double check the height, so it's room. It's not pressing against the cover. And now the new capacitors are in place, and it will prevent the power supply from releasing the magic smoke. Those clips on the MOSFETs are for cooling. It's using the chassis, the metal in the chassis for cooling the MOSFETs. And that's why it's the plastic film behind the MOSFETs as well, is to prevent them from shorting against the metal. And the step motors and the light and the motor. And the power supply. And you see on the blue little part underneath the hand wheel, I put that in for releasing the engine. So when I'm turning the hand wheel and feel the mechanic, how freely the mechanics go, I don't have to turn the motor around as well. Now the front is in place, And the moment of truth, is it working? Yes, it is. Just checking the buttons. Yep. And is it running? Yes. And if the needle have gone into the needle plate, I always use some fine sandpaper and remove the scars and making the needle plate smooth and nice again. And when removing the needle plate on those machines, it's much more easy if you just lowering the feed dog and checking the position of the needle against the hole in the needle plate, so it's correctly aligned there. So just to see if I have to adjust the position of the needle plate, but it looks good. And of course, cleaning up the machine. Some oily finger marks is not so nice to have there. And checking if it's sewing correctly. Checking the stitch length, the stitch width, and the stitch length balance. And thread tension, of course. Yeah, and it looks good. I'm satisfied.